Hello everyone, this is Yoan and welcome. Today's episode is the quilting episode and I'm going to share this really cool, crazy scrap quilt project. What I love about this quilt is you really don't get to know how your quilt gonna turn out, obviously, until you start piecing them together. So I just love the mystery of it. This is a great way to get rid of your piles and piles of scrap and really fun to make. The finished measurement of this quilt is approximately 61.5 by 71 inches. You can adapt this quilt to any size that you want since we're gonna work with consistent size blocks, which is 10-inch square blocks. So I hope you enjoy this quilt along episode, and of course if you have any question you can always ask me in the comment section down below. And without further ado, let's get started. So what I suggest you do first is to divide your scraps into 3 piles. So here I've got the strips pile. So these are all strips of fabric in various width. I've got 1 inch, 1.5, 2.5, up to 4 inches. And this one here is the pile of random cuts. So I've got a bunch of remnants, small cuts in irregular shapes and sizes. Now this one here is the pile of larger size scraps. So what I'm gonna do with these fabrics, I'm going to cut them into various size strips. For example, with this scrap here, I'm going to fold this in half to make it easier for me to line up my ruler. And then I'm going to straighten up the edges first. Alright, now that I've got clean edges, I'm going to measure 2.5 inch and then cut. Now I think I can still get one more strip out of this, so I'm gonna measure 1.5 inch and cut. And with this little strip, I think I may as well just trim this and make it into a 1.5 inch strip. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same with all of my larger size scraps, and I'm going to cut them into various size strips so it will be easier to piece them together later. Alright, so here I've got 2 trays of fabric. So this pile here is the random cuts. So they're all in a different shape and quite irregular, and these are the strips. Obviously, I ended up using more fabric than this. This is just for example's sake to keep it clean in the camera. So let's see, I'm gonna take this piece here. So I'm not gonna straighten up or square this one up. I'm just gonna use it the way it is. And I will take one strip and then sew this together. So I'm sewing with 1/4 inch of seam allowance. You can do chain piecing if you want to do this faster, but this is an example, so I'm going to stop here. Now I'm going to trim off the excess fabric, and this will go back to my random cut pile because I believe I can still make something out of that. Now I'm going to open this one up and give this a finger press, just like so. Now I'm going to take another strip and I'm going to sew this one to this side. So since this is a longer strip, I'm gonna add more fabric as I go. So you will need to position the strip at the bottom and then go ahead and start sewing. And when you're done with the first fabric, go ahead and grab another scrap of fabric and line that up with the strip, obviously right side together, just like so. And then go ahead and continue on sewing. And then you want to take another scrap of fabric and do the same as well. So I'm just going to continue on until I get to the end of my strip. So this is how mine turned out, almost look like a garland. So I'm going to take my scissor and cut this so it will become individual pieces. And again, I'm going to finger press all the seams. Now I'm going to go back to my larger piece here and take another strip. And then I'm gonna repeat the same like before. So I'm going to chain piece here. So I will position this strip at the bottom and then start sewing. Then I'm gonna take another fabric. This was the one I pieced before. So I'm gonna add this and then I'm gonna keep going until I get to the end of the strip. Again, I'm going to cut this into individual pieces and finger press the seams. So I will pretty much repeat the same sequence and simply having fun with this. And I really don't mind wonky pieces, but sometimes it's just a little too wonky, so I'm just gonna trim off the edges here so it's easier to piece this with the strip. And if you've got like test block or extra blocks from different quilt, you can also incorporate them. Now, once you've got a fabric that is measuring a little over than 10 inches, you can go ahead and set this aside. Later on, we're gonna square this up. So from your chain piecing, if you've got two fabrics that almost the same dimension, you can join them together, just like these two here. Another easy way to work on uneven edges, you can also place your strip of fabric and line that up, and then you're going to sew along the edges with 1/4 inch of seam allowance using the upper strip as the guide. Then I'm gonna go ahead and trim off the excess fabric and finger press the seams. I also like using triangles or any bits and pieces that has weird irregular shape. I like to incorporate them on the center of the block and build around it with the strips. This way it's easier to square them up later and not much bias that I have to deal with. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue on building my blocks, and really there is no set of rule in scrap or crumb quilting. All you need to do is just sew your scraps together to create a new fabric. Here I've got some blocks that already measure a little over than 10 inch both widthwise and lengthwise. Now I'm gonna go ahead and press them and then square them up. So I like to press my block from the center to the side with a little bit of steam, and you can press the seams towards any direction that you want. There is no particular rule on that. Now that I've got my block already pressed, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line that up on my block. And here is my 10-inch point. So I'm going to trim off a little bit from this side, and then I'm gonna rotate my block and then trim that off again, basically until I got to the size of 10-inch square, just like so. If you want to make different size block, you can make it smaller or bigger. It's really up to you. You may want to keep it consistent so it's easier for you to decide how big of a quilt do you want, and really it's just make the whole piecing easier. So here I've already sewn the total of 42 blocks. Now I'm going to start piecing them together. So I'm gonna lay out my blocks into 7 rows, and each row will have 6 blocks. So I'm going to randomly sew 6 blocks at a time to make each row. If you want to lay them out first on your design board or somewhere on the floor just to see how they're gonna look, you can do so. So here I've already sewn my blocks and have gotten 7 rows, and I pressed them to the opposite direction to make sure that each seam's good and nested together once I started sewing each row. Now I'm gonna start sewing these rows together, so starting from the first and the second row. I'm sewing this with 1/4 inch of seam allowance, and I nest the seams as I go, but you can also use pins to make sure that everything is secure, whatever makes sense for you. Once you've done piecing all of your quilt blocks together, go ahead and add the border. It's a great way to kind of pull the whole quilt together. My border is only 2.5 inch wide. Obviously, you can make it wider if you want your quilt to be larger in size, of course. And this is how my quilt top turned out after I added the borders. If you don't like border, you can simply skip the border and go ahead to the next step, which is layering your quilt quilt with the quilt batting and the quilt backing, and then you want to go ahead and baste the quilt sandwich. I use spray basting. That's my favorite method. You can do pin basting, or some people combine pin basting and spray basting, or you can also use the fusible batting. So it usually comes double-sided, so all you need to do is simply iron it. So whatever method works best for you. Alright, now comes the most fun part, which is quilting. So I free motion this quilt with meandering loops design. This is one of the easiest free motion design, I believe. But if you are more advanced with your quilting skill, of course you can do any intricate design that you like. Feel free to have fun. Or if you are still a beginner, you can do easier design with probably with your walking foot, maybe just straight line or wavy lines. Whatever works best for you. You can even do hand quilting if that's what you like. Now comes the last step, which is binding your quilt. So go ahead and bind your quilt in any method that you like. So with this size, I ended up using 8 binding strips. I finished off my binding with hand stitching. I actually posted an alternative binding method, which is with decorative stitches, because I know not all of us has the time or probably has the ability to finish the binding with hand stitching. I know some people may have like chronic arthritis that really difficult to actually hand stitch. So this method works great as an alternative. I'll have the link in the description box down below for you to have a look for your reference. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope your quilt turned out great. Please consider subscribing if you're not already, so you won't miss any future upload. And I shall see you next time with another fun sewing and quilting project. Goodbye!